Alright, in this video we are going to see how to create a simple CRUD operation. We'll be just using how to create and how to get values in this video. In case if you are starting MERN stack at the very basic level, this video is for you. We won't be using any copilot or AI suggestion. We'll be writing code line by line so that in even we know a little even we'll get to know what each function does and how the syntax is laid. It's all about JavaScript. We don't have to worry about it. Once you have clear understanding of JavaScript, the MERN stack is really very easy. So the first thing is we just need a good grasp of JavaScript objects. That's one thing. The second thing, let me show you what this project does. So let me add any name, and I'll be adding any email, and if I click on save, what you'll see is just see this information getting added into the database. Once it got added into the database, you'll see the data is also getting fetched and displayed over here. So when talking about database, we'll be using MongoDB Atlas. So here we have a database called let me just refresh this so that we can see the inserted value. So as of now we have inserted the value test, and you should see the value test being populated on this database. Yes, it's there. So in this video we'll see how to create everything from scratch. I'll be deleting this complete folder and deleting everything from scratch and starting from zero, and we'll learn how to add proper file structure when it comes to MERN. So we'll be creating controller, model, and a public folder which has all your assets like HTML, CSS and JavaScript and the routes and everything from scratch. Now the list of work that we will be doing, will be installing Mongo and Express first, then we'll create a server that is responsible for running this application, then we will be using a middleware to serve this HTML, then we'll create schema and connect our MongoDB, our application with this cloud MongoDB, and then we'll build a HTML form and we'll use the JavaScript fetch function to send your form data to the controller, and controller sends your data to the model. Here in this case it's database. Likewise, once the data got saved, and you'll get the response from the server through controller to your HTML file. That's when you'll get this data saved text. So it's like sending your form from HTML to controller to database and receiving the response. Let's say data got saved, and you'll be getting the value from controller to HTML and you'll be displaying over here. So here we'll just talk about only two. When we say CRUD, it's create, read, update and delete. We'll just focus on create and read. I have shown you how to create this with the help of adding those field, and that's on create part. And the read part is, if I refresh the page, you see the data is getting fetched from the database and displayed it on the HTML itself. So create and read, it's what we are going to see. Along with that, the file structure of MERN. So let me just start from zero. So here I'm going to create a new database. Let's just call it as employee DB. The name has to be set, and we can give the collection as employees and click on create. So once, okay, you see we have a database and we have a collection, and make sure your cluster is online. You see the green dot, that signifies your cluster is online, so that you can talk to your cluster or your MongoDB Atlas with your application. So let me start this from scratch. For the first time, let's just create a new folder on the desktop. So I'll create a new folder in the desktop. I'll just call it as employees, and let me just select this folder. It has nothing for now. You know, it has nothing. Now what we do is we open a terminal, control backtick. You see this terminal got open. Now we'll install the required packages. The first and foremost thing, we are going to use Express. Express is responsible for connecting your responsible for having routes, controller, and model. So route Express is important. Express is a framework, it's one of four pillar of MERN. And let's install. So before doing anything, we need to say that install node here, npm init, and we'll see a package file, package.json. Once it got installed, and you just have to click enter every time, and your package.json will be ready. You see package.json, and now let's install all the dependencies. So I need a npm install mongoose and express. So it would take some time, and I want you to keep an eye on this file particularly. You'll see once it got installed, a new dependency would be created. So you can see dependency mongo and express, and we'll install two more packages. And let me just add two more packages. So the first package is npm I node1. I'll say why node1 is needed, and .env, which is where we'll keep all our secret files. So these got added. There was another way to add these two files as not dependable, but I'll show it in the new the other video. But let's focus on, as of now we'll just need these four files, which is important. Now we need the main file. So let's say the entry point of your application, the entry point of my application, I am going to name it as server.js. Usually it is suggesting keep the name as index.js. Let me just name it as server.js, and over here we just need to create that entry point server.js, where we will create our own server. Now to create our own server we need express. So we'll create an instance of express, and we need to import our express package with the help of this this command require, and express is the package that we need. Now there is a pattern that you need to follow in the server.js. First of all, it should have all the config related code on this section, and on the second section you need all the connection related, and then you need middleware related, middleware related code, and then you need routes related code over here, and then you need all the here you should have controller related code. So that's fine, we'll see later on. We need server. So this is the basic structure that you need to follow to avoid having your to avoid having your codes here and there. So you have to organize in this way. So this is the basic structure. So now what we need to create, we have created the instance of express. Now again we need to create another instance called app, we'll name it as app itself. Now we can use this instance to create a server. Listen, and we need to pass the port. I'm going to name it as 3000, and when the server is active, I want a message on the console saying that console.log server running. Now to run this file, you just simply have to, let me just clear this, we just simply have to type node the entry point. If you click enter, so there is one issue here. You need to create the instance of express first, and then this instance has a function called express. So let's call that, we'll name it as app. This instance, express instance, has a function, and we are using that again. Now let's type node. To restart, what we do is node server.js, and once you do this, you see that server is running. Now the next thing is, let's just display these value in the HTML. So to do that, what we need is, we need app.get, a simple route. It accepts two parameters. The first one is the URL, and the second parameter is the callback function. So with this you can send a request and a response, and let's just send a simple response saying that hello world. When I refresh this, make sure you have closed this server and restart it to see the changes. Server.js, and you see the HTML shows up. Now what if I want, instead of hello world, I want UI monk? So again what I need to do is I need to close this running server and type node server.js to see the changes. I have to refresh this again. So this is time consuming, so every changes that you make on the file, you have to quit the running server and restart the server. So to solve this, we have a solution that's called node.mon package. Now we need to create a command. Now this is a place where you write your command. Now if I type npm run test, so if I type test, you'll see this text on the console. That means when you type this command npm run test, what you write here, what is written here, you'll see the relevant code got executed. Same way, what I want is when I type dev, I want a code to execute, and the code is node.mon the server.js. Here you can simply make it as node.js, but you have to type again and again, so that's not practical. So I'll type node.mon.js. Now if I type npm run dev and click enter, the code would get executed. The code would get executed node.mon server.js, and every time I save, I'm pressing Ctrl S now. Every time I save, you will see UI monk 2. And if I refresh this, you should see again there seems to be an error. Let me just fix. So now you see every time I click Ctrl S, and if I make this as UI monk 4 and make a refresh, the page is getting saved. If I make this UI monk 5 and click save and refresh the page, you'll see the server is automatically closing itself and restarting it again on every Ctrl S. So that's the reason why we need this package. Now that's clear. Now let me just show you how to import values from .env file. .env, we have to create a new file, and I'm going to create a new variable called port, and I'm going to have 3000. We can have anything, I'm just placing it 3000. Now we need to import our .env, so we need to import that package. Remember, we have installed .env package, .env, and which require, this is the package that we require is .env. Now we need to call that .env. So there is again .env has a function called config. We need to call it, and in place wherever the port is, we can simply call process.env dot the name of the variable. Now this would be same. There won't be any change. Now we would be keeping all our important files, let's say the connection related to database, all our important file in this env file, so we can access all the information from this file. For example, I'm going to use my database. I'm going to store it, the connection between my application and the Atlas, MongoDB Atlas. So this is, it has all the important information like username and password, and the database also you will find on this link, userdb. So we have named it as employee db, employee db. So I would be calling this variable only. Every time I won't be just writing the this link over and over again. Also there is one more thing which is very important, all your important credentials like this password. If an hacker gets this password to himself, he can do he can just populate all his data into your database. So that is one such hacking. There are many ways that he can misuse your username and password. So after this video I will be changing this password, that's why I'm showing it on the screen. Usually it should be protected. So that's the main purpose of .env. Now let me just get into our flow now. Once these are done, now let's connect our application to the database. So for that, the proper way how the business standard is, we'll just create a config file, and inside config file we have a database.js. So here we need Mongoose. We need to create an instance of Mongoose, and the package that we need is simply Mongoose. And over here we want to connect, will be creating a function. So whenever I want to connect my application to the MongoDB, I'll be just calling this function. So let me just name this function as connect db, and this is a function, JavaScript function, and we would be using try and catch because this function is an asynchronous function. So we will be using try and catch every time whenever we feel that this function is going to be an asynchronous function. Try catch. I'm not getting deep into try and catch because it's very basic, so it does nothing. It handles if it handles error, so this block handles the error, this block runs the code. Now I want to connect my application, so Mongoose has the instance that we created has a function connect where we need to pass our URL. So I'll be passing this URL. So now our db.js file should have access to this .env file. So for that, again we need to import the package .env, and it has a function called config, or else you can simply write this way also, that is also valid chaining of function in JavaScript. So this is going to be an async function, and once the async function is done, we would be getting a value, and it can be await. Now once it got connected, I want to simply display db connected. So where our function, where our database would get called, wherever I want my connection, I will just simply import this file. So the file that we have created is config. The config has a folder, and then we have database db.js. Now I can call this connect db. So whenever you create any file, there is one thing that you have to notice. Whenever you create any file or function, you should export it. So module.exports, and you need to export this. That's only when you will be able to access wherever you have called. So this is related to all the connections. Now if everything goes well, you should see it could not find config, so we can simply write, I think it's not, I have named it as config js. It should be config.js. It's a little typo. Again there is an error. Yeah, it got connected, but it says MongoDB is not, it could not find this MongoDB. Yes, process.env.mongo URL. That's how we pass our variable, and it says server is running and DB got connected. So now once your application is able to connect to the DB, now we need to set what are the values. So it's called schema. So I want name, I want email, so let's add those schema. So to create schema, we need a model folder, model, and inside model we need a new file, and we'll call it as user model.js. So it's like defining your table in SQL. So to create schema, again we need, it's related to MongoDB, so we need Mongoose. It's an instance, so require the package is Mongoose. Now what we need to do is we need to create a schema. So we can call it as employee schema. It's a variable. Actually we need to pass an object, and we have a function in the Mongoose and it's called schema. Note that it's capital S, and we need to set the column name. So here it's not column name, we call it as document and collection. So one document should contain how much, what are the values. So I want name, you can simply have this, and name should be of type string, note the capital S, and then it is required. So these are the two basic thing that we will use for now. So in the coming video we'll dive deeper what all values can be added. Cool. You can simply surround this as a string. That's also possible because it's JavaScript object. It accepts both the value. Now the second thing is we will add email. It can also be string. Now what we need is we need to connect our schema to the model. For that, how we will do is mongoose dot model. So the collection that we have created is employees, and the schema that it should follow is employee schema, this one. And then, as I said, whenever you create a file you should export it. So export module.export. So this is how you will be creating a schema. And then let's focus on route. So before route, all your HTML should be inside one folder. So that folder we will name it as public dot, simply a public. So inside public we will have index.html, style.css, and script.js. So for the style is for CSS, style.css, and this is going to be for the JavaScript, script.js. Now in the HTML, for understanding, we'll just say hello from HTML. Now how are we going to load it? So in our entry point, so this is our entry point. Whenever I search for localhost :3000, what you see here, it's coming from a text. I don't want this. I want to send the response as a file. So response send file. Now you cannot directly type public/HTML, so it's not possible. So here instead we need to call a package. So that package is going to be path. This path, we are creating an instance of path, and this path has a function called join, and this function accepts three parameters. The first one is the directory name, underscore directory name. The second parameter is the folder name, public, and the third parameter is the file which you want to load. So here it's index.html. So if I refresh, you will see the data is coming from this index.html, public/HTML. So if I refresh it again, so it's coming from, you know how you know now how to load a HTML file. So every time we want to send an HTML file as a response, this is how the process would be. Let's say this HTML has a CSS, so you need to give a little attention here because it's little complicated to understand. Now let's link our CSS. Now if I give a background color just to test, it won't get linked. So if I refresh, it won't get linked properly. So for that we need to use a middleware. So why middleware? Middleware runs every time. So whenever someone looks for this URL, I want a middleware to run every time, and that middleware is app.use. So whenever you see a word called use, so consider that it is a middleware, app.use. And over here you will find, whenever someone the middleware that I'm going to use is simply this one, which we have called here. But we won't be saying the HTML, we'll just pass the There seems to be an error. Let me fix the syntax error. So it's quotes inside quotes, so we have to simply make it as single quotes, or I think we can simply directly pass this. Cool. So what I'm saying is, make sure your server is running. If there is, I have use requires a middleware function. Okay, so it requires a middleware. The middleware is what? The middleware is express.static. So this is the middleware. Inside middleware we need to pass the path. So by default, whenever you're loading, you're sending the request as HTML, which is this, but this HTML has its supporting file. So has supporting file means it has its own CSS, it has its own JS. So we are saying to the server, whenever there is a request for index.html, but index.html accepts, looks for server style.css. So in that case, make this folder as a default folder. Don't search style.css anywhere. Search style.css inside the public folder. That's what this middleware does. So I hope the concept of middleware is understood by you. So what happens is middleware runs every time. So that's the concept. Or else you will be writing anyway we have to write whenever we want to send. This is how the process is going to be. So now we understood how to create an HTML. So let me just paste the HTML which is required for us. So I'll explain you, because creating HTML would be time consuming, also creating CSS would be time consuming. I'll just copy paste only the HTML and CSS. I'll guide you the JavaScript line by line. So let's call the CSS. This is our HTML and this is our CSS. Okay, this is not the proper CSS and HTML that I want. Cool. I have added the HTML and required CSS. Now we have so far what we have learned. We have learned how to create database connection, how to create schema on your MongoDB, and then we have seen how to create server. So this is not the sequence. First we have seen the server. We have created a server, then we have looked for the database connection, then we have seen how to call our static HTML into the application. Now so every time you won't be sending the HTML or the routes, you won't be dealing the routes in the main entry point. Instead we would be creating routes on its own folder. So for this, let's use a route, so routes folder, and the routes that we want is user routes, user related routes. I want all the user related link to point to this routes, user routes.js. So how are we going to call this? So to call this, simply again we will be using the same, we will be user routes, and we will be calling it from the routes folder. Inside routes we have user routes. Now we would be using this in the routes part. Call this, so app.use, so again it's a middleware, app.use. so whenever someone search for user, I want all the user related function to come from a folder called user routes. So here in the user routes we will first call express, require express. Then next thing, express has router. Routers again is a function, note R is a capital, and then as said, we need to export whenever we create module.export. It's not export, module.exports router. So now this route can take care of get request, router.get. It can now take care of get request. It can now take care of post request. It can now take care of simply put and delete. So for now we need only the get request, so we need only the create request for now, which is post. So let me just make sure you have understood it properly. So whenever someone search for /user like this way, USER, whenever I click on hit, Express will search for it in this page. So router.get, here it accepts two parameter. The first one is the URL. You can have it any URL. I'm not having a particular name over here. And then it will have a callback function which will handle the request and response. So I can send the request response dot send. You can simply hello from user routes. So if I hit enter, you'll see hello from user router. So it's a get request. That's the reason it got handled. In the coming video you will find router.post. In this video you will find router.post, but in the coming video you will find router.put, router.patch, router.delete. For now, understand, this is how the routes will work in MERN. Now since we are only focusing on users, that's why the user related routes is handled by user route. So in the coming video you will find department related routes, and it could be anything, address related routes will have its own file. But for now let's just focus only on the user related route. So again, this isn't the complete way of responding. Usually what happens is, when you send a request, the request would be sent to the user routes, and we have seen, and the normal process would be user routes again will send the data which you have sent to the controller. So now it's time to create the controller. So let's create the folder called controller. So I'm talking about MVC pattern. So user controller.js. So here in the user controller we will just have a function exports, a function name, let's say create, let's say get users. This is the place where your request and response would get handled. I just shown you over here just to understand how the routes work, but this will not be the correct place to handle the request and response. So this is the correct place. Now we'll send the same function, and this is coming from user controller. Now we need to call this in the user routes const, and we'll call it as user controller instance, and it will come from the file. We have to properly pass the path. Since we are inside the user routes, we need to come one step back and then call controller folder, and inside controller folder we have user controller. Now we need to simply call this instance, and inside this instance we have one function, and that function what I have defined is get users. Now whenever I search for user, you will see the data. If everything goes well, I believe there is an issue over here. So actually it's a function. The function you won't be just having in this way, you'll be writing it in this way. So exports dot would come definitely. and if I search for, you see this is the request, you're getting it from the controller. So this is how MVC works. I want you to take a note of it. So routes send the value to controller decides whether I have to connect with the database and fetch the value and send the response to the user. So for now, understand, this is how we would be sending the response from the controller, and in this video we will see how to connect our controller to the model and fetch the value from the database through model and display or send the response over here. For now, understand this way. So let's create one more route, and that route would be for the post, and the function that is going to take care of is create users. So let's create a function over here, exports create user, and let's just simply have this for now because just for testing purpose. Now we are saying whenever someone fills this form, these values has to be handled by this function create user. Now we are getting into the HTML, we are getting into the core part, which is CRUD. In the HTML we have two input field. One has type name, the name, and the second one is email. So if I click on send, these value would be sent to this route. As I said in this entry point, what we said, whenever a request is sent to this route, which we are sending it from the HTML, and these related routes, who should handle? This file should handle, and this file says check for the relevant function in this controller. I hope now you understand the flow. If you don't understand the flow, just rewatch this one more time. Cool. Now we need to write a JavaScript. When I click on send, I need to get these two values and send these two values with the help of fetch function to where? To the routes, and routes will send it to the controller, and controller will send the data or save the data to the model. So this is how the process is going to be for now. In the JavaScript, make sure your script.js is connected. In the JavaScript, we need to call the input field value. I'm going to create a input field value and call it as name input, and we'll be using document.query selector to understand or fetch the class. It has a class called named. I hope you have noticed it. And then we have email input field, and we'll call it as email. Now what should I do? Get the form also. It's not a class, it's a HTML tag, so I'm just passing it as form. So form dot add event listener. So here, whenever someone submits this form, what should happen? We have a callback function, and here by default the page would get refreshed. I don't want the page to get refreshed, so e dot prevent default I would pass. And in the over here, I need to fetch the values of the input field. Console.log, I'll just simply call the instance of the input field and pass this property value. So now if I click on submit in the console, you should find the value that I have entered, Vishal and Agnel. So you see, we are able to access these two values. Now we can access these input field, and we will send it to the controller. How are we going to do that? We'll be using the fetch function of JavaScript. It will ask as an endpoint first, so we'll just define endpoint, and the endpoint is, which is this one /user. So the first parameter is, it is asking where should I send the data. I want you to send the data to this endpoint, and what all data I need to share. The first one is method. Let the method be since we are going to save, it's going to, the method should be post. And what type of data you are sending? I'm sending related to what? I'm sending data related to JSON. So content type should be JSON. Content C is capital, and hyphen. We need to pass type, content type colon, and it's simply application slash JSON. And what data you're going to share? That you have to convert it into string, convert it into JSON. So now we need to pass these, create this as a object. So let's create an object called form data, and this form data will have two objects inside, two values inside it, which is name, and name we will get it from name input field dot value, and the second one is email, which we will get it from email input field, value, its value, it's a property. Now we need to pass it to the fetch, and it should be body, and I want it to convert it into JSON. Now it's a JavaScript object. To send it, to convert it to JSON, what we will do is we have a function called JSON.stringify, and we would be passing our form data. So once this is done, let's see whether we are able to send the data or not. How are we going to check? We will be checking it in the I think it's network tab. So let me close this. We'll pass name, we'll pass email, we'll click on save, and if I click on user, actually we need to, in the payload you will find we are able to send these as a request. So you see, this request can be seen on this tab called payloads. We have sent it to form data. So now you can see it's in the form of JSON as well. Now what we need, we want to connect our controller, so it is properly, we are properly receiving the data from the controller. So as said, if I click on save, it's a post method. A post method related routes is create user, and create user is simply now displaying what? It's simply now displaying this line. So that's what we have seen this. Now we don't need this, we want to connect our controller to the database. So to talk to the database, we need to call model here, const user model, and it requires, what do you need? I need to come one step back, and you will find model, and inside model you will find user model. Now it's a async way, so we need try and catch definitely. There is one more thing that you need to understand. We need to have a middleware. Whenever we are trying to send our form to the server, there should be a middleware. So there should be two middleware. One is, whenever we use middleware, we'll type app.use. We need express.json, which is one middleware, it's a function, and the second middleware is URL encoded, so that we can send our values through URL encoded, and it accepts extended colon true. So these two middleware has to be present, so that whenever a server sends a value in text format, so that your MERN application can understand. But your MERN application won't be able to understand the text format. Your MERN application will simply convert your text from the server to the JSON or to the JavaScript object with a function called parse. So this is where the code is written. So it's written inside. We don't have to worry about parsing of string. So it does it internally. That's why we need this express.json. I hope that is clear. Now let's get into the controller. So we can now access the request with the help of request.body.name. We have name, we have email. So let's create a function const form data, and we will create a object, and this object will have name and email, so that we can store it into the database. Now to store it in the database, we'll simply call it as user. It's a model. Now let's create a new instance, new user of user object, and we can store it user.save, and we can inside new object we need to pass our object, and since it's async, we have to make it await, and we need to set this as async. Now what we need to do, we need to send the value. So before that, the app got crashed. Let's make sure that everything is new user. Okay, new should come over here because we are creating a new object, that's why. And let's see again what has failed. .env await await. Okay, there is a little issue over here. You see, this is what causing this. Cool. Now we are now able to fetch the value from the URL or the request which we have sent it over here. You can see on the payload we have sent it, and now we will be receiving it over here, and we will be saving our value into the model, and then we need to send the response. Since we are creating, so we need to send the response and a status. So there are very common codes which are 200 and 201, 200 for success to get all the values, and 201 for creating resource. We have created a resource because we have sent the value to the database, so that means we have saved the value to the database. That means we have created a resource, so it's status 201. Now we need to send the message. Let's say it can be a text also, but we'll prefer object message colon what message as data saved. So once the data is saved, you will see this message. If the data is not saved, so there is some error on the database. It didn't got connected. In that case, you will just give console.error, console.log, or you can say console.error also, that also work, and we'll pass the error. Now if once the data got saved, we will be receiving this in the HTML. Now to access this in the JavaScript, first of all, then you will get the response, and we need to convert that response into JSON because we know we have sent the JSON value. And now after getting the value in the JSON, we need to get the data again. Then we will be getting the data, and this time we can simply make it as a proper function. If we get the data, and we'll simply give console.log data.message because it's a JavaScript object, because it got converted into JavaScript object. Cool. Refresh it again, and let's try a value Vishal and the email, and click on save, and it says fetch error 500. Let's see what is the error. Click on this. We are able to send the request, but in the response we got something like this way: a reading name cannot read properties of undefined name. So it says it could not understand what the name is. So this one. So one such issue is its headers. Let's try again. Name, email, click on save, and it says 201 status is done. That means we see the data got saved successfully, and in the console also you should find it says undefined. That's not an issue, but the data is getting saved. Now next thing is we need to get the HTML. So we'll be displaying the HTML in the result div. So you can see there's a ID called result which will display. So you can name it as result div. So once we receive the data, I want to change the inner text and display our message, data dot message. And once this is done, I want to reset the form dot reset. Refresh it. On the networks tab, let's try adding new value, uimonk@gmail.com. Click on save, and you see data saved. We have received that data got saved. Now if you want, we can simply modify this, saying that this particular name got saved. Okay, we need to pass this inside backtick. If that doesn't work, we need to find another way. Let's try. @gmail.com. Okay, it's printing as it is. So it is because we are passing it as string. We need to pass it with backtick. Now this would work. Click on send. Now you see the name which you have sent, mail data saved. Cool. Now it's time for fetching the values and displaying it on the HTML. Now again we need to send the request with the help of JavaScript. So let's write a fetch request first. So get user is a function that takes care of method get user, and we just simply need to call the model. Here the model is user, and we need to query called find, add a function, and this will display all users. And since it's a database operation, we need to pass it inside try and catch. Try and catch, it's because it's going to be async function, and we got those value, and we'll be sending all the value through a response. And this is again going to be an object, so we can simply pass this inside send directly, and here this time the status would be 200. So this is the code. Again, let's see, I got an error, same issue, there was a syntactical error. So this is how the controller takes care of the request. When someone sends get request, controller simply talks to the model. Once controller talks to the model, that model will display get all the values in the form of object, and we will send that object as a response. Now we need to fetch this response on the JavaScript. So let's create a function called display data, and what this display data will do, display data will simply give the fetch request. So fetch where, fetch endpoint as a get method. Now once I get the request, so once I get the response, I need to convert it into JSON, convert from JSON to JavaScript object, and once I get those data, we'll be getting all datas, and we'll simply pass them into a function, or else I can simply make it as new. That function would be create table HTML, and we need to pass that datas which we received from the fetch request. Now we need to define this HTML, which is very easy. We will simply have it as data itself. We can name anything, but let's keep it as it is. Over here we need to call the table data. So in the HTML, where all things is going to get appended inside the table data. This is how it's going to get appended. So we need to call the table first. Table, inside table we have tbody as a HTML and tbody div. Now what we need to do, get the tbody. So before that we have objects. This objects has multiple values inside it. So to access one by one, we'll simply make it inside for each. To access one by one, we'll simply have this over here. So we can access one by one as data, and we are passing one by one data inside HTML. Now I hope it is clear. One object, so it's a collection of objects. Let me just show you. If I make a refresh, because we haven't refreshed it long enough, after saving all our database, inside employees you will find employee, and you see all the data got saved. So it's a collection of object one. So it's called document 1, document 2, document 3, document 4, document 5, document 6, document. So like we have many such documents. So to access one by one, we are using for each, and I am sending one particular object. So this one particular object into this data. Now I am going to display it as tbody div dot inner HTML plus equal to, make sure to add plus or else it won't get concatenated. I'm going to write HTML, that's why backtick. Just copy the whole HTML block and paste it. So in place of name we have data dot name, so we need to pass it inside query string data dot name. Same way data dot email. If everything goes well, we need to run this function. So when page loads, you can call this, when page loads, I'm sending a get request, you can see, to the controller, to the controller. So now this controller has the fetch request with the, so it would check in the routes the get request, and who is handling the function? The controller is handling the function with the function name get user. So the get user, what it will do, it will fetch the value from the model and send the response, and this response we will access it on the last part, which is then over here. So first time it's going to convert into JavaScript object, and the second time it would convert it into the actual data, and we will receive and manipulate it. Now how are we manipulating it? We are manipulating it and making it as a t-body HTML. So if I refresh it, you should see. So there seems to be a fetch error, I guess. So it says first thing, it's JSON function. Yeah, all the data got imported along with the HTML that we have already added. So to stop this, we can simply when this function got called, I want to simply make this as blank. Refresh it. So these are the values that is already present. Let me add one more. Aaron@gmail.com. Click on save. Aaron data saved. Now if you scroll down a bit, you see Aaron data got listed because of fetch. So the first one is for post operation, the second one is for the get operation. On page load also the get operation will work. So that's all for this video. Thank you so much for listening.